Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to give the waiting room just a moment to let everyone filter in, and we'll get started in just a minute or two. Hello. Welcome to the next member hour, which begins our AMAA series. Today's presentation is an introduction to the Alliance for Modernizing African Agri-food Systems. My name is Sarah Rodriguez. I am the Director for Member Engagement at ASABE. ASABE member hours were started as an opportunity for our members to learn, connect, and grow. In a few minutes, we'll get things started, but just a few quick session ground rules. Please do keep your audio muted throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat during the presentation, and I'll also be opening for verbal questions during the question and answer period at the end. This meeting will be recorded and will be available for later viewing and sharing through the ASABE website. Today, we're hearing from Ajit Srivastava from Michigan State University and Margaret Gitau, Purdue University. They're presenting an introduction to the work being done by the AMAA community and how you can join the effort. Ajit, please take it away.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm really pleased to share this hour with you and give you a little bit of a background on this initiative that we are really very excited about. It's called Modernizing African Agri-food System. This is an initiative of the ASABE Global Initiative, and it's really organized under the E2050/AMAA subcommittee. It has been approved by the board. So with that background, I'd like to draw your attention. I hope you can all see my screen. The tagline is making a business case for investment in agri-food system technologies in Africa. As academics, we are always focused on research and innovation, but research and innovations don't have much impact if they don't end up in the business world or scaled. So our focus is on how can we bring these technologies to transform African agri-food systems so it is productive and profitable. So let me just quickly review some of the mega trends that you have all heard about and seen one way or the other. We are projecting that the global population by 2050 is expected to be 9.6, give and take a few. By the year 2100, the population is supposed to be around 10.9 billion. So we have heard these numbers, and these are incremental changes. But I want you to pay attention to the orange color. In 1950, population of Africa was 9% of the 2.5 billion global population. In 2010, that population was 15% of 6.9 billion global population. In 2050, it is expected that population will be 25% of 9.6 billion. And then in 2100, it will be 39% of 10.9 billion people. If you do the math, by 2050, that population will be 2.5 billion people in the continent of Africa, at nearly a doubling of population from 2010 to 2050. Now, this is not a small incremental change. This is a massive doubling of population. So we have to really pay attention to what's happening in Africa. The other factor or megatrend is urbanization. Urbanization is increasing at a rapid rate, as you can see in this diagram. If you take a look at the pink color, you can see it's almost a linear increase in population over the last 70 years or so as a total population. But if you take a look at this light blue color or teal color diagram, which is the growth in developing countries, and that is an exponential increase, as you can see. And so the urban population centers are growing in developing world at a very rapid rate, which does include Africa. And really the reason for that is there is a increase in the middle class, which is a good thing. We want people to live better, have more disposable income, but that brings another change, and that is that diet changes. When people are more affluent, that means they're going to demand higher quality food. They consume more animal-rich protein and more processed food. So the whole food system will have to transform to address those changes. So those are some of the three really overarching trends that we are looking at. Then we start looking at how do we respond to those. So if we take a look at the growth yield or productivity trend in the last 50 or so years, 70 years, you can see that China has made a significant improvement in their yields, nearly 5 times increase. Southern Asia, which includes a big part of that is India, has also made significant increase, but Africa has significantly lagged behind in yields, and that's something we need to understand why. So if we take a look at a big picture of Africa, what we see is that there are nearly 51 million farms in Africa, and 80% of those farms are classified as smallholders, meaning they own less than, or they farm less than 2 hectares of land, about 5 acres or so. However, 30% of food is produced on those small farms. So they are small, but they are contributing in a significant manner. We already talked about the population is expected to be 2.4 billion. But then looking on the economic side of things, they're expecting that the imports of food to Africa is expected to be around 110 billion by 2025. Now, we are used to hearing these big numbers, so let me provide a context. The net growth of US agriculture at the farm level is around 150 billion per year. So putting that in context, the imports are going to be about the same as the net worth of US agriculture. It is also expected, because of the urbanization and affluence, that the spending of top 18 cities in Africa is expected to be 1.3 trillion. And those are tremendous opportunities. When we think of Africa, don't think of people being poor, people having buying power. They are affluent, but it's still, we have to think about how do we meet their demands. And according to African Development Bank report, they are projecting that investment in transforming 18 agricultural value chains can result in as much as $80 billion return on investment per year. So these are really staggering numbers and actually encouraging numbers. So if you again go back to my tagline that I mentioned, that is making a business case. So we've got to take a look at this whole shift of paradigm of how we approach African agriculture. It is not an issue of food security. It's the issue of economic development. How can agriculture be an engine of economic growth and development in the continent of Africa? So keeping that in mind, some of us met in 2019 in Boston during the ASABE meeting. There's a group within ASABE called ASABE. This is the members of the society that have interest and background in Africa, and they meet as an active group. And so they started having a conversation about how can we take a different approach to making really massive changes and transformation in African agri-food space. So out of that, there was a committee that was assigned. I was part of the committee, and we started putting together what is our vision, what's our mission, and how do we organize to realize our vision and mission. So simply stated, our vision is a modern, productive, and profitable agri-food system in sub-Saharan Africa that ensures food security, provides economic growth, and improves quality of life in a sustainable, equitable, and responsible manner. So that's our vision. And our mission is to promote modernization of African agri-food value chains. And now I want you to pay attention to the term value chain development here. Production is an essential part of value chain, but we are not stopping at production. We are talking about all the way to consumption, which is really critical to developing the agri-food system. And as I said earlier, we are organized under the ASABE Global Initiative. And we set aside basically move forward. Okay, what are the guiding principles for us? And so we all agree that our main purpose of doing this, guiding principle, is that it should lead to economic development. And we have seen around the world that even in the US, agriculture contributes nearly 30% of the total economy of the US. I mean, we are about a 31 trillion economy, and agricultural impact is around $7 trillion. So it's a huge component of US economy. However, that is not the case in Africa. Agriculture, even though it employs a lot of people, it doesn't contribute that much to the overall economy of African countries. We should also talk about smallholder needs. When we talk about modernizing, we're not talking about making farms big. Modern is not big. Modern is modern, appropriate scale. And that's something we should keep in mind. We're not talking about taking US style big Steiger tractors and over to Africa. We're talking about developing cutting edge technologies that are very appropriate for African needs. Of course, we have to focus on productivity and profitability. Profitability is not a dirty word, it's actually a good word. And we have to focus on technologies, methodologies, policies, and organizations that would help us transform agri-food system. And of course, innovation should foster environmental protection, should promote economic growth, and human capital empowerment. So those are some of the guiding principles that we all agreed to. But then came the issue, okay, this is a huge task. We cannot get it all done by ourselves, sitting over here in the United States. We have to engage our partners and professionals, especially agricultural engineers in the continent. And so what's the best way to do it? So we came up with this idea of how about having regional hubs in the continent, and perhaps one in the east, one in the west, one in the south, and one in the central area. And those hubs are the ones that are actually going to do a lot of the work, where we can actually empower them, collaborate with them. So establishing regional hubs is a very critical part of our approach. We also realize that we have to kind of understand various critical issues, and we divided them into 4 pillars. So pillar 1 is the technology, methodology, and innovations, and the pillar lead from the US side is Professor Kumar Mallikarjunan. He's a professor at University of Minnesota. And they are tasked with to constantly be identifying, promoting technologies, adopting technologies that are appropriate for modernizing African agri-food system. The second pillar is enhancing entrepreneurship and business development. And that pillar is led by Professor Terry Howell, one of the past presidents of ASABE. And Professor Howell brings significant experience from his time in industry before he joined the academic world. He's now a new department chair at biological and agricultural engineering at University of Arkansas. Their role, or the pillar's responsibility, is how can we take a technology and scale it so it has a business impact. And so those are the areas that he's going to be focusing on. Then the pillar 3 is building capacity and workforce development. In order to sustain an initiative of this type, we have to have workforce and the right kind of workforce. Now we know that in Africa, they have ag engineering program. They are producing ag engineers. But one of the things that we have to look at is that, are those the right kind of professionals that will make a difference in the way we want it to? Or should they be essentially similar ag engineers that we are producing in the US? I mean, that's a good question, and that has to be addressed. So should the new professionals in Africa be more focused on technology and business aspect as opposed to designing systems as is the focus in the US? So again, we need to look at that and how do we promote changes in the program and training entrepreneur to support this transformed African agri-food system. So Professor Dirk Meyer, who is a professor at Iowa State University, has significant experience in international arena, is leading that charge. And by the way, I should say that all of these leads have a counterpart in Africa, because we're not just driving it from here. We definitely are in a collaborative mode. The pillar 4 is infrastructure and policy framework. Of course, anything you do, it has to be supported by the infrastructure, whether it's the transportation, communication, energy, and what have you. And one of the problems that we have in some areas is that there is not enough infrastructure. So what are those infrastructure needs that would be needed in order to support and sustain a transformation that we are talking about? So Professor Ngadi, he is with McGill University, is leading that charge. Okay, so so we started talking about, well, we're going to need some money to get some work done. And so we said, well, we need to look at what type of funds we need and where do we need it. So we said, well, we need some planning funds. So it's just to get us off the ground. And we came up with a number. It may be right or off, I don't know. Then we need some recurring base funding. And we estimated the recurring base fund to be something in the order of about $250,000 per year for the next 5 years. And then there is project-based funding, and that is case by case. We will be on the lookout for funding opportunities from various foundations, whether it's USAID or Ford or Gates or what have you, and how can we as a society take advantage of that, or as an initiative, take advantage of those opportunities. And so those will be case by case funding opportunities. One of the things I should point out that, you know, those of us who are in universities are very used to writing grants and getting grants funded, and it comes to our university. But taking approach that that ASABE membership includes private sector members and also academia. And that brings a strength that I think is very critical to what we are trying to accomplish. Because making a business case, you can't do simply driving it from academia. But we have that membership. So we want to engage with the private sector members. And how can we then approach an agency and say, look, we're not just going to do research or teach and graduate and produce graduate students. We have members who are in the business world who actually know how to implement some of these approaches. And then we identified funding for innovation hubs, and again, this is a massive fund. We are talking about $50 million for 5 years for each hub, roughly. So that's about $200 million. And this is where we have to get into conversation with major donor agencies. And for example, MasterCard Foundation, they're committed to developing youth in Africa. So how can we work with them? We work with the Rockefeller Foundation, and they are committed to developing energy infrastructure, green jobs. We are very much committed to that part. Then some other organizations like John Deere organization, they are committed to supporting smallholder farmers, and that's what our goal is to. So those are the kinds of agencies that we will be working with. And these are some of the details about how we will spend those funds, different types of planning funds. And the base funding will again go to support a part-time director. We are all volunteers, we all have day jobs, but we get to it. And I should mention one thing. We have been meeting, this group, the core group, has been meeting every 2 weeks since 2019. We devote hour and a half to talking about various aspects and developing this consistently for the last 3 years. So, but we still think we need a dedicated person. We also need support to bring faculty on board on special topics. The kinds of things we're talking about putting out is as white papers, position papers, and for that we need to bring people in who can devote maybe 6 months on a concentrated basis to some aspect of this project. So these are some of the things with the, and then of course, when we go to the innovation hubs, this is where the massive funding is needed. We are not talking about building new buildings or such. We're talking about collaborating with already existing organizations and entities, and how can we work with them and collaborate with them, add value to what they're doing. And a good example is that we are already working with UNDP to establish a innovation hub in Sudan, and or South Sudan, I should say, and they have secured funds, but we have the expertise to establish processing labs and other labs that are critical to supporting this initiative. So those are some of the approaches to establishing innovation hubs. So what do we expect out of this, of the whole thing? We expect to identify what are the bottlenecks in development of African-centered technological solutions. What are the portfolio of innovations, technologies, methodologies, processes, policies, etc. Standards are critical. This is one thing that ASABE is very strong in, is bringing standards. When we talk about scaling technologies, without standards, it will not go to first base. So, and again, innovation, establishing innovation hubs, establishing collaboration, putting out publications and papers, documents, and really coming up with a way to provide business loans And we are working on developing with a private individual, how can we develop an impact investment fund that will then fund some of the projects by providing low-cost loan or blended financing. And then how can we develop some kind of matrices and a scorecard so we can gauge how are we making progress? Are we getting further, or are we simply spinning our wheels? So those are some of the ways that we can assess our outcomes. This is our briefly organization. We have an executive committee, we have external advisory board, and we are collaborating with organizations like CIGR, PASAI. PASAI is Pan-African Society of Agricultural Engineers. They have been very cooperative with us, and I talked about these 4 pillars, and then we have these regional hubs. The members of the executive committee are myself, Professor Gitau, Professor Ileleji, and Dr. Sinorpe Asem Ayavli. She's with Shell Corporation. We have advisory board, and these are the folks in the list. There are 18 members, and the chair of the advisory board is Professor Soji Adelaja. He is the endowed chair professor of agricultural food economics at Michigan State University. He has tremendous experience, and actually he has served as a science advisor to a former president of Nigeria. So we'll give you some things that we have been able to do. As I mentioned, we got started in 2019. Then we held a virtual session in 2020, which was basically to let people know who we are. Then we held another session, and actually we actually held a session in 2022, not 2021. And then we are now planning, this was part of our plan to start holding conferences or events in the continent. We have to take our show on the road, and that's where this conference comes in. Our plan is to hold these conferences every 2 years in the continent, because we have to engage with the players. And what we're learning is there's a lot going on. There are too many moving parts, and unless we are engaged and totally understand the landscape, we're not going to be successful. So going to Africa and engaging with those folks is absolutely critical. So with that, I thank you for your participation, and if there are any questions, I'll take them, or I'll turn it over to Professor Gitau. And I'll stop sharing.
Oh, Ajit, I see a question just popped up. The question is, I believe you mentioned African farms needing right-sized ag machines and tractors. Can you share more about those machines?
Yeah, that is actually a $1 million or $1 billion question. Really important, because 70% of farm work in Africa is done by hand. So unless we find a way to mechanize, we're not going to make much progress. So the question is, what is the appropriate source of power? 30% is done by animal power, and that is about the limit due to a lot of factors. So we have to find a source of mechanical power to mechanize farming operation. The question becomes, what is that source of power? So to look at that, I looked at what has been done in China, what has been done in Asia, in India, and other countries. And what we have found is, by the way, India has made a significant progress in this area. They have really, about 90% of farm work is now mechanized, and they have gone to smaller tractors. So China went to two-wheel walk-behind power tillers. And they were very popular in rice growing area in Cambodia and Thailand and Vietnam and Korea and Japan. But unless you are growing rice, those type of tillers are not that useful in maize farming or sorghum or millets and so forth. What based on India's experience, what I would say, there are two options: either a walk behind tractor in the range of 5 to 8 horsepower, or a riding tractor that would be in the range of 30 horsepower would be an appropriate source of power. One of the things that I've been looking at is that should it be a diesel engine, gasoline engine, or electric? And the more I look at it, I think the electric technology, electric two-wheel walk-behind tractors or even four-wheel riding tractors have real potential. And because one of the problems that we have is fuel in farms. They are expensive, they are pollution, they create pollution, but they're not easily accessible. But solar energy can provide that source of power. By photovoltaics have come down in cost quite a bit. So think about maybe rural solar microgrids that will provide energy for not only these tractors, but other operations like irrigation and milling, grinding, and some on-farm processing. So that's my answer there. Okay, there's another question. Extension play a great role. Are we looking into implementation extension programs in Africa? Absolutely. The extension is very important, but we have to take a look at in a different way. Currently, in most countries, extension is part of Ministry of Agriculture, which is a very different model than extension in the US. US land-grant universities have three-pronged approach, which is teaching, research, and extension. But if you put extension in a government organization, then it becomes somewhat difficult to coordinate. So I think this is where private sector service providers can play a significant role in not only providing services, but knowledge. And some of that is already happening in the US. The major companies that are providing services or selling products are also providing services. So that could be a good extension aspect. Next question is, has AMAA carried out any research in some selected countries of Africa to ascertain the reality of on ground? Okay, so the folks that you saw the pictures of and others that we are working with have long history of working in Africa. For example, I've been involved in one way or the other in Africa for the last 10 years on mechanization. We have Professor Dirk Meyer, who has been working for longer than that in post-harvest technology. So our membership has significant experience, and we have good connections. So we actually understand quite a bit what is real, what is practical. But that is not to say that we know it all. We have to constantly be ground truthing our assumptions and engaging those folks. Side comment: how can my employer, help maximize African machines? I think the best thing would be to work with us. And one of the things we can do is connect you with the right people. And as Professor Gitau will talk about in a minute, the conference that we're holding is actually, there are three aspects of the conference. One is, of course, a regular conference where we share our ideas and research. The other part is a technology showcase where we will showcase innovative technologies. And this is an excellent way. If you have technology, you can showcase by joining our, by the way, the conference is all virtual now. So you can have a showroom which will be visited by people who are attending the conference. And that is one way to connect with folks in Africa. Let's see. Instead of arranging AMAA only focused conferences in Africa, I would encourage collaboration with annual conference hosted by PSI and association. Jeff, I totally agree with that. And actually, we are already starting to talk about where the 2025 conference should be. And if you have any idea, contact any one of us and we want to discuss it. But I absolutely agree. We do not want to have a standalone activity. We want to work with um, something that is already ongoing and add value to it. Okay, my employer produces hydrostatic and electric drive products. Sarah, please feel free to share my contact. Yes, I should say that at Michigan State, I have built a four-wheel electric tractor, which is driven by hydrostatics. So I would love to talk with you and see what we can do, how we can introduce this technology in Africa. Okay, Brahm Verma. This works well. This work appears focused primarily in machines and technology. Is this project also looking to prepare for better use of genetic material, efficient use of natural resources, and better management of making timely decisions? I don't know about genetic material, but we are definitely committed to sustainability. And I see a significant area of collaboration with this circular bioeconomy initiative of ASABE, and there is no reason why this should not be a carryover effect into Africa. We do not want to make the same mistakes we made in the US. We want to learn from it and develop a system that will be sustainable. For example, regenerative agriculture. And so if we develop a mechanization system or processing system or value chain, where is the circularity that comes in? So we got to keep all those things in mind. Are there legal or government hurdles that hamper development? I don't know of any legal hurdles. We will find out when we implement the Impact Investment Fund. We are being very, very diligent about making sure we dot all the I's and cross all the T's. But I'm sure there'll be some legal challenges. We'll find out. But government is something that we have to constantly work with them. For example, if you try to import a tractor in Ethiopia, there is a 100 or 200% surcharge. Well, how can you overcome that? We have to sit down and talk about that. That developing this technology and making agri-food system more profitable would actually provide more revenues to the government than taxing the technology that comes in. But we got to have very clear white papers along those lines.
And if I may add to that, so infrastructure and policy frameworks is one of the big parts of our AMAA initiative, because when we first started out, that's the one thing we recognize is a lot of this is not going to happen until there's at least, the policy frameworks in place. We have part of our partners, the societies, partnering with governments, and pretty much getting the players, key players we need so that this aspect is not left out, especially as we get towards the innovation hubs, which will not happen if that part is not taken care of. If we have not looked at the legal implications, we haven't looked at the policy frameworks, we haven't looked at the infrastructure. And maybe I can talk now about the conference and we can continue because some of the questions I'm seeing here, I think people need to come to the conference. This is what we want to talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Ajit. I assume it's okay for me to continue.
Yeah, please go ahead, Margaret.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Ajit, for that very detailed overview on the AMAA initiative. I find myself a whole lot more excited about the initiative now, and I'm part of it. And thank you, Sarah, for organizing this member hour. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It's really great to see you here. And it's really great to see the questions that are coming up, because those are the things that we really need and want to keep discussing and keep addressing as we move forward with the AMAA initiative. I'm just going to talk about the conference that is coming up in a month that I want to welcome everybody to. This conference. If you have not already signed up, I can see from your questions that this will be of great benefit to you as well. So as Ajit mentioned earlier, that the whole effort started in 2019 in Boston, where we formed that planning committee in partnership with ASABE. We had that special session in 2020, defining our activities and defining our outcomes in 2021. We had an all virtual, this was during the pandemic, so our 2020 was all virtual as well. 2021, at the annual international meeting, we had a day-long special event with thought leaders. And really, this is where we started to take steps to implement the initiative. We started off as Modernizing African Agriculture. Some of you may remember that. At this point, the extent of the initiative and the extent of the issues that we were discussing, we realized that need to rebrand, and we rebranded into the Alliance for Modernizing African Agri-food Systems and formed into that E2050 AMAA executive. The advisory board that Ajit just showed, Professor Srivastava just showed, we formed that again also in 2021 after long deliberations. We have been meeting bi-weekly since 2019, and so you can imagine there was a lot of discussion and a lot of thought that went into that. We then formed our pillars and put out a resource article that is still there online. Something has gone wrong. There we go. Okay. And so this resource article really highlights where we came from, what we're all about, and also looks at the key things, the key issues that came out during our meetings, a special session in 2020 and our special sessions in 2021. They are all captured there. And this gave us that footing to move ahead, that we needed to move ahead into discussions coming forth. In 2022, this was in Houston, that we held an in-person meeting, this was a day-long special session, and here we focused on implementation. Already did all the discussions beforehand in 2019, 2020, 2021, and we felt in a good place to start focusing on how do we really now put things on the ground, how do we start implementing this initiative. So we had that discussion on understanding our challenges and opportunities, the SWOT analysis that Professor Srivastava talked about. When in the background, strategic focus, we already had our strategic plan that we wrote in 2021, and this was really our guiding document as we thought about how we are going to move forward. At this point, we started to finalizing our goals, our short, midterm, and long-term goals, are setting our milestones and developing action plans. As Ajit mentioned, we have partners in government, in the nonprofit sectors, but also understanding and academia, understanding too that here industry plays a really big role in what we're doing and in modernizing African agri-food systems. And so we had that special invitation to potential industry partners and started to look at it also in the point of integrating and engaging industry in a more meaningful way. 2023, moving forward, this was a plan, is that we have a biannual event. At this point, we feel we're in a good place to start engaging directly in the continent. We already have a lot of partners on the continent, including professional societies on the continent like PASAE, Nigerian Institution of Agri-Engineers, Kenya Society as well, and different other societies that we have engaged with on the continent. It was time to get onto the continent and start being on the continent. So this plan is for a biannual event rotating in different countries and actually different regions in Africa. Our inaugural conference was in West Africa. Initial plan was to have it in Senegal, and you may have seen all our advertising for that. As we were moving along with the planning, we recognized that participants were having challenges in terms of being able to secure the necessary support that they needed to be able to attend the conference. And we ourselves, as an organizing committee, also were experiencing that same challenge in being able to support all the speakers that we wanted to support for the conference. And so we moved this into an all virtual conference, and that is exactly how we are going to do this. Again, this is a working conference, and I'll talk about it in a little bit on the details on what we have there. We're continuing to assess the status of where we are as AMAA, to share ideas, to bring together our stakeholders and actors. The big part of it is youth and women engagement that are a big part of what we're doing with AMAA. So when we look at the detail on how this conference is panning out, or we're planning it, we have a pre-conference. These are the highlights for the conference. We have a pre-conference, and this is November 14th. We have short courses and workshops. Currently, we have 2 really great short courses lined up that are free to all registered participants. One course of the courses is on smart agriculture, and the other one is on entrepreneurship. On the same day, we also have a poster session. We have several posters lined up as well. And those, again, will be on the general theme of the conference, Imagining African Agri-food Systems Moving Forward. On November 15, which is our formal full day one, we have our opening and recognitions, our invited keynote address. We then have technical and working sessions that are centered around the pillars. So Ajit talked about our 4 pillars that we have. So each of those pillars have their own technical and working sessions on both day 1 and day 2. We have technical presentations that are planned a keynote session in each of those technical sessions. But really, what we want to come out of these sessions are projects that are going to go forward, with which we're going to go forward as AMAA. So each of these technical sessions has a working session that is attached to it, led by the pillar leads and co-leads, in which those projects now start to be defined, as well as who are going to be the key actors and key players in executing those projects. We have a series of innovation talks. Innovation talks are short lightning talks, about 5 minutes. We want to hear about your innovations, want to hear about those innovation ideas, given quickly. It's a pitch, it's a highlight on what is it, what's the outcome, and those will also take part during the conference. Technical working sessions continue around the pillars. As I mentioned, we are really focused a lot on the youth as well, and this is true too for the innovation talks. We're really encouraging youth presenters there. And the big thing has been, as we have gone through all the way from 2019, a recurring theme that has come up is that youth today do not seem to be all that interested in agriculture or agricultural related fields, which is a concern as we move forward. And I want to note that this is not a problem that is unique to Africa. There are other regions around the world are experiencing the same challenge on how to engage youth. We can't continue doing things the way we did in the past. The world has changed. Things are going towards generative AI and things like that. So how are we ourselves changing to adapt to that and ensure that we're keeping the youth engaged given our rapidly changing world? So led by ASABE's YPC group, this youth career session is going to be happening at the conference, and we're encouraging everybody, especially our young engineers, to come join this session. Departments and societies contact session. There's a question I think that came up about realities on the ground there, and Ajit also talked about what's going curricula on the ground as well, in comparison to what's going on in the US. So those are some of the things that will come up at this department and society contact session. So primarily we're looking at department heads and of course others who are interested, and society leads to be the ones leading in this session. Our culminating point for this conference is the summit, the AMA summit. I've mentioned it a couple of times in the chat. So we are looking at a variety of topics here, including sustainable intensification, including standardization that Ajit mentioned earlier. All our speakers and partners are invited to this session as well as anybody else who is interested. African Farming Reimagined, this one is engaging farmers. Again, there was a question about reality on the ground. So in this particular session, we actually want to hear from the farmers themselves and from people who work on the farmers. What are their challenges? How do they see the modernization of African agri-food systems? What's their perspective on how to move forward? And then a session with our advisory board. Technology and Entrepreneurship Showcase will continue throughout the conference. And again, these are technology exhibits that will come, that will be presented by different companies and different entrepreneurs. In there too is a plan for a mentoring session with young entrepreneurs, with some of the more seasoned entrepreneurs. As this unfolds, we'll pass on more information. Another one of our products here is an excellent article that just got submitted, or that just got published, on the outlook of harnessing technological innovation competence in sustainability transforming African agriculture. I encourage you to look at this one as well, as it captures again a lot of how we're thinking about things and the direction we're heading. And so again, welcome everybody. I want to welcome everybody to the conference. A lot of the things we are discussing, we'll be discussing at this conference. It will be really great to have you on. If you have not yet registered, please join us. And I'll turn it back to you, Professor Srivastava.
Well, actually, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions that have come in, and I'll go ahead and read them top to bottom. So the two of you, please feel free to go back and forth as you see appropriate for these questions. Would you consider walk-behind small riding tractors to be appropriate across all aspects of crop care and growth, from plowing through harvest?
It depends upon the crops, the cropping system, and the cultural practices. So if you're talking about actually tilling the soil with doing a primary tillage, then perhaps a walk-behind tractor is not adequate. You need a four-wheel drive tractor that with a plow, and that I would say probably a service provider can provide that. But then the one aspect that I have learned through my work in Burkina Faso and Senegal is the weeding. Weeding is very important, but often neglected. And weeding doesn't require very much power, but you have to go and weed often. And if you do proper weeding, you can literally double your yield. But it's a very tedious job, and it's often ignored. My meeting with farmers, I found out that they do once or twice in maize production. And so I would say a two-wheel tractor would be a very effective tool to weed more often and literally double your yields. So I would say yes. You can obviously plant with a two-wheel tractor. You can do some secondary cultivation. Now harvesting becomes a bit of a challenge. It would require quite a bit of development, but then I would say this is another thing that can be farmed out to a custom operator.
And there's another, it looks like it's more of a comment than a question, and Ajit, you already addressed it in the chat, but I'll go ahead and read it for the group. To be effective, AMAA needs to be fully acquainted with the local status and mechanization in Africa to understand the complex challenges, lessons already learned, and local constraints to modernizing mechanization in agricultural production systems using appropriate technology. And you shared that the USAID project conducted a survey of African mechanization in 2021. And so there's a good understanding of mechanization based on cropping system practices in Africa, and that you're able to share that report. Are there additional questions for either Ajit or Margaret? And feel free to unmute yourself if you'd rather ask your question verbally. Here's another comment. For proper implementation of AMAA, I will suggest that firsthand data should be collected throughout Africa from local farmers.
Good point. We definitely recognize that. And one of the aspects of there are two sides of things. One is this: in this conference, we are really working hard to invite, and there's a special session devoted to basically listening to farmer representatives and organizations. So we understand what their needs are, what their challenges are. The other thing is that when we get into actual implementation of innovation hubs and such, we want to hold a lot of listening sessions, a lot of focus groups, so we totally understand the reality on the ground, not just from the farmer's perspective, but also those who will be engaged in developing a full value chain. And I cannot overemphasize the importance of taking a value chain approach to modernizing African agri-food system.
I'm going to go ahead and drop in a link to our AMAA page in the chat. If you have any questions about any of these programs that have been discussed, there's a podcast episode linked there with more information, information about the upcoming conference, and lots of contact information. Please go ahead and visit that site. If you have any questions, let us know. Any other final thoughts as we round out the hour? Final questions?
I'll just make a comment. First of all, thank you for joining. We are open to having you becoming involved with us. There is room for everybody. This is a big initiative. We need a lot of help. And if you want to engage with any aspect of it, if you want to be part of the 4-pillar teams, let us know. If there's anything else that you want to be engaged with, contact Professor Gitau or myself directly, and I think you probably have my email contact. So again, thank you for joining.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you to both of you. I'll go ahead and close up the session today. We will have more upcoming AMAA focused member hours. Beginning in January, we'll have a monthly series ongoing. If you would like more information about those, as the information becomes available, we'll be posting that at our events page, asabe.org/events. Wonderful. Well, thank you all and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you, Sarah.